Hello! I'm so excited that you're here because I've got an amazing episode of the She Means Business show for you today. So I interviewed the amazing John Lee Dumas. He is the creator of Entrepreneurs on Fire podcast. I've known him for a long time, and I remember, I think in 2017, I was on his podcast, and he's just achieved so much. He has a podcast that has millions and millions and millions of downloads. He's interviewed over 3,000 entrepreneurs, and he's got a new book out called The Common Path to Uncommon Success, where he has 17 steps that he shares to build a successful business. And so in this chat we talked all about, firstly, some of the steps from his book, but also like how he's been able to create an incredible lifestyle business. He works 5 days a month, but has a multi-7-figure business. And he's been so intentional about how he set it up to live the life that he wants to live. And I think it's so inspiring. And it was amazing hearing his story and also hearing his journey too, of how he went from being a soldier in Iraq to actually starting the podcast and all the different things that he attempted in between. And I think it goes to show that sometimes figuring out how to find the thing we want to do with our lives is, taking some wrong paths too. So it's so inspiring, it's so empowering, and I really hope you love this episode. You are watching the She Means Business show with me, Carrie Green. I'm the founder of the Female Entrepreneur Association and the author of the best-selling book, She Means Business. And every single week, I'm going to be talking with you about how you can turn your ideas into a wildly successful business and actually live the life of your dreams. You can do this, and I'm so excited to show you how. So let's get started. Hello, everyone. I am so excited that you're here for this episode because I am joined by someone very special, the amazing John Lee Dumas. John, how are you? I'm so excited that you're here.
Carrie, I'm fired up to be here. It's been far too long since I've gotten to hear that amazing accent and voice in person. I think it was 2017 back at Chris Ducker's event in London. So it's wonderful to hang out again.
I know, I'm excited about this chat, and I know I was just saying this before we hit record, but for everyone listening, so you interviewed me, it must have been years ago. Well, it must have maybe been actually not that, maybe 2006, no, it must have been 2017 because my book was out, and you were telling me, I can't remember exactly, but something around I was saying about how hard the writing process was, and you were like saying you could just have written one and then written another one, and now you've actually written your own book, and and we were talking about how it is actually quite an interesting process writing a book. But congratulations on the book, the Common Path to Uncommon Success. That is very exciting. How do you feel about it?
So this book, Carrie, was my little passion project over the 2020 quarantine time that we all got to have. And I feel fantastic about it. So thank you for asking. I mean, for me, I said, I need something to do to not go stir crazy during, this quarantine lockdown. So I am going to finally sit down after a decade of interviewing over 3,000 successful entrepreneurs, of course, yourself being one of those amazing entrepreneurs, learning so much from them, seeing, by the way, what my audience was struggling with every single day and what they still needed answers to, and saying, I'm just going to sit down for once and for all, and I'm going to write the definitive answer to all the questions that my audience gives to me, which are essentially 10 basic questions. They're all a little bit different questions, but they're all essentially asking the same 10 questions. And so for 2 hours a day for 8 months, I'm curious actually about kind of what your writing style ended up being for some of your books. But for me, it was 2 hours a day. I was capped out. That was all I could do. But it was the first 2 hours of every day. I sat down and I just wrote. And my goal was to get to 1,000 words a day. And over those 8 months, I actually wrote 71,000 words. It took me 480 hours to get there, to get to these 273 pages that now comprise this book. But I'll tell you, I went the whole hog with this one. I signed with a traditional publisher, HarperCollins Leadership. So I got an editor, I got a publisher, I got a book launch team. And I had, this entire process that I was going through with them over these 8 months to frankly produce what I now know is the best book that I'm capable of writing, The Common Path to Uncommon Success. So thank you for letting me come on here today and chat a little bit about it.
Yeah, no, and it's such an accomplishment, and like I know how it feels when you poured your heart and soul into it, and like, yeah, you've got so much knowledge and expertise after interviewing 3,000 entrepreneurs. It's incredible, and you've been doing it since 2012. Like, what an adventure! And I'm just so excited to read the book myself, because there must be so many golden nuggets in there that are going to really help people to, like, I suppose in a way, like, shortcut a lot of things, because it's easy to, I don't know, for things to take a long time sometimes when you're in business, but it just to have for someone to make it a simple plan. Like, I know you've got 17 steps in there for people to follow, so it just makes life so much easier. So I'm really excited about it.
And I think shortcut, Carrie, I think shortcut's the right word. I mean, that's what books are. It took me 10 years to acquire this knowledge. It took me a decade of interviewing amazing entrepreneurs like yourself, Tim Ferris, Gary Vaynerchuk, Tony Robbins, Barbara Corcoran, learning from every single one of those conversations, the thousands and thousands of hours. And now I've put into a book that, you could read in a handful of hours. And it's like, that is a shortcut. That is, being able to press the fast forward button on all the mistakes that I made because I didn't have this step-by-step process. It's literally a cheat code. Like, it is something that, like, if I had back in 2012, man, I don't even know where I'd be right now, because it's just like I had to learn things the hard way, and now people don't have to. They can follow this step-by-step process. Because what I did essentially was step back and say, hey, what are the commonalities that Carrie has, that Tony Robbins has, that all of my successful past guests have? What similarities do they all have with one another? And when I boiled it down, 17 core foundational principles were there, 17. And just kind of being the military analytical person that I am, I said, okay, this is a roadmap. If I can put this in the chronological order that I need to, I can set up this step-by-step roadmap that's going to lead to financial freedom and fulfillment. And again, it was a labor of love. It was the 10 years downloaded into this writing process. And by the end of it, I had exactly that. I had the common path to uncommon success. I had the 17-step roadmap to financial freedom and fulfillment. And that's what I have right here today.
I want to talk to you more about these 17 steps and talk about like some of your favorites or the things that you think are like super impactful. But I also want to talk about your story, because I think your story is really inspiring, from like how you got into doing what you're doing today, how you've created so much success, and you live such a dreamy life. Like at least, I mean, like you're in your pool and your amazing house. It's incredible. So can you talk to us about like, your story, and because you started off firstly in the army, so that's quite a different career path.
And it is interesting, how the tangled web that weaves my life, because, if you had told me back in my army days when I was in Iraq, commanding a tank platoon, that like one day, like I would essentially, get to hang out, in my spare bedroom, talking to the world's most inspiring people, I'd be like, that sounds weird and crazy. But, it's just interesting what happens when, you're open to like what's next. And so for me to get real concise with my story, I was born in a very, very small town in Maine, which is a very rural state in the United States. And I spent the first 18 years of my life in this very small town, very sheltered. Went to college on an Army scholarship. So I spent 4 years as a cadet in the U.S. Army. And then when I graduated, I spent the next 8 years as an officer in the U.S. Army, 4 active, 4 in the reserves. And then during that active duty components, I spent 13 months in Iraq as that tank commander I mentioned, in charge of 4 tanks, 16 men in a war. And by the way, I served with, fantastic British troops and Australian troops, Canadian troops. And it was just, really cool seeing, how similar a lot of the different countries' militaries were. And in some cases, like how different, like, nothing against the Aussies, but man, they were just able to crush beers every single day. I'm like, why can't we drink? We're not allowed to drink. They can drink. Like they're drinking Fosters left and right. Like it sounds like whatever. Anyways, I digress. After my military experience, I was just like, okay, now it's time. Like now it's time to like get serious and like actually start a career. Like that was fun, I can't really call it playing army because I was actually in a war. So, it was fun, for what it was for being a military officer. And there's also, terrifying times and scary and tragic times. But there were also wonderful times, the camaraderie and, serving your country and those things. So there was pros and cons. But I was like, now it's time to be a civilian and to go after, what's next. And for me, that turned into, Carrie, 6 years of struggle. And I mean 6 years of struggle. From 26 years old to 32, I struggled. I tried law school. I dropped out. I went to corporate finance. I quit after a year. I tried commercial real estate, residential real estate, all these different careers. This wasn't over 6 weeks or 6 months. This was 6 years of me trying to figure these things out and these very traditional career paths and just falling flat on my face. And it was really finally at 32 years old, back in 2012, I looked in the mirror and I said, like, you've got to figure something out. Like, you've got to at least start learning and educating from people who you're inspired by. And that was like my first step into reading the right books, listening to the right audio books. Like we just talked earlier about how, books are like, they're like a fast forward button. They're like a cheat code. They're a shortcut, and they so are. I mean, I could sit down in a few hours, read Think and Grow Rich. I mean, hello, that was unbelievable. And like that set me on this path that eventually led me to listening to podcasts, because I was like, well, what are entrepreneurs doing right now that's working right now? I mean, I loved Napoleon Hill's book from the 20s, but like what's happening in 2020? Like what's happening right now, not 1920. And so, I started listening to these podcasts. I was loving them. But I found one thing that I was always kind of complaining about, Carrie, which was, where's the daily podcast that's interviewing entrepreneurs? Because these shows are all once a week. I'm listening to each episode, but then having to wait 6 more days for the next one. Like, I need to find that show that is every single day so I can be inspired every single day. And it didn't exist. And that was kind of my first like entrepreneurial aha moment of my life of like, why can't I be that change I wish to see in the world, to quote Gandhi? Like, why can't I be that daily podcast I wish existed? And of course I knew I was going to be terrible, and I was, but I said, hey, whatever, let's do this. I'm going to interview the world's most inspiring entrepreneurs, literally 7 days a week. And I launched a podcast in 2012, and I just committed to that. And I like to say, Carrie, because I was the only daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs, I was the best daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. I was also the worst, but I was the only. And guess what? When you can be the only, there's power there. And that power sprung me to 3,000 episodes, to 100 million listens now of the show, to 1.4 monthly listens every month right now, and over $20 million in revenue since the launch of this podcast, all from that one revelation. Why not a daily podcast? Why not me?
That is so incredible. And I'm so glad that you shared that story, because I think that so often, like, so many of us are lost. And like, I remember myself before I committed to this idea of building this platform for women in business, like I felt so lost for so many years, going in circles and trying all these different ideas and all these different things, and never really feeling like that thing was what I was meant to be doing, and all these pathways. That being said, I feel like all those pathways led to me actually arriving at the destination that I was, the right place. But I think so often people are like trying, and they feel like they're not sure, and they're trying to figure it all out, but it's taking so long, like 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and then they start to feel hopeless, and they start to feel like living the dream life or having some kind of big success or successful business just isn't on the cards for them. And then they just they literally give up before they've even really got started with it. So I think it's so inspiring to listen to you share that story, and to say like, it took me 6 years, because I know it took me years and years and years. And sometimes it just takes, I don't know, that time. That being said, obviously in your book, you talk about like the big idea, and you share some advice around like, okay, like here's what you need to look for, here's how you need to do it. So obviously for you like pieced it together and had this aha moment, but how can people have that aha moment a bit faster? I mean, do you think it's possible for people to have it faster?
It is absolutely possible. It is absolutely possible. I took what I consider, looking back, the hardest road possible, because I just didn't know. I didn't know that this world existed. During those 6 years of struggle, I didn't know that this existed, like this ability to like have a big idea and like have a zone of fire and go all in on that. And just at the end of the day, the sentence that I really love to sum up everything that I believe in is create the best solution to a real problem. Like if you can do that one sentence, you're going to win. If you can be the best solution to a real problem, you are going to win. So now let's back up a little bit. There's a reason why Carrie is so right when she said, so many people are just going to struggle and they're going to try to find something and they're going to do this and they're going to be consuming that and then they're just going to give up. They're going to fade off into the distance and whatever that is. That's what happens to most people, because the reality is so many people do this. They see what Carrie's doing. They're like, oh my God, like she's so successful. Like I want to do that. Or they see what I'm doing in the podcasting world, or what so-and-so is doing in this world, or person X or Y or Z. And they're saying, I see that they're having success doing that. I'm going to do that. And they end up, Carrie, launching a weak, pale imitation of that individual. And then they wonder why they struggle. Of course they're going to struggle. And again, I see this probably more than most people because I run Podcasters Paradise, the biggest paid podcasting community in the world. Excuse me. And people that launch podcasts like every single day that are doing just what I shared, just these weak, pale imitations of other successful podcasts. And no matter how much I beat this drum, some people just can't understand that's not going to work for you, because it's working for those individuals because they're living in their zone of fire. They've identified their personal big idea and they're getting up every day and living in their zone of fire. That's not your zone of fire. So that's why chapter 1, step 1 of this book, and again, this is step 1 of 17. So it's not like this is step 1 of 3. This is step 1 of 17, but it's an important step. Identifying your big idea, not a weak version of Carrie's big idea, not a pale version of JLD's podcast idea. No, your big idea, so that you can wake up every single day living in your zone of fire. Because what we don't need, Carrie, more of is people waking up every single day and being miserable about what they're doing, or doing a weak, pale imitation of somebody else, or just knowing that they're living a life less than they're capable of doing. What we need more of is people waking up literally on fire every single day, excited to dive into what they know their zone of fire is, their big idea is. So I want to get people to there right away. And I want to help you and guide you and take you through these exercises so that you can maybe for the first time in your life identify your personal big idea, and then you're ready for step 2 and beyond.
Yeah. I think it's just everyone's got something within them that they can turn into a really successful business. And I think so often we don't recognize like the knowledge, the experience, the skill set, the passions that we have. We don't recognize them within ourselves. And we are looking at what's out there. What is someone else doing? Oh my gosh, they're doing amazingly. And then forgetting the great stuff that we have within ourselves. And I think, cracking yourself open to that and doing exercises and doing different things to really tune into that is so powerful. Is there anything like a little...
a reason for that, Carrie, I want to just kind of break in, is like a reason they're going down that path and they have those thoughts is because so many of them think, well, what I'm good at and like what I have is my zone of fire, my big idea, that could never be this huge, awesome, successful business. And that's the common thinking that I see from every single person. That's so incorrect. The most successful people that I've interviewed over the last 3,000 episodes, again, they've become the single best solution to one specific real problem. And some of those problems are tiny, little, itsy-bitsy problems, but they become the number one solution to it. So everybody beats the path to their door for the solution to that problem that they have. So believe me, when you try to resonate with everybody and start with this vague, broad concept because you think you need to blow this up to a big idea, you're going to fail because you're going to resonate with nobody. But when you've identified a niche, which by the way is step 2, discovering the niche within your big idea that's not being served, that's an underserved market, that's a void that needs to be filled, that's where you start getting traction. And again, if you have 100 fanatical fans, 1,000 true fans, I mean, that is an ability to get initial traction and momentum and to grow out to what you want to be. Like this podcast was a niche of a podcast. It was the only daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs back in 2012 when podcasting wasn't anything and not many people were listening to it. But I used that as a wedge in that tiny niche to get some initial momentum and traction. And then I've blown it up over the last decade into the media empire that it now is today. But it started with owning and dominating and being the best solution to one problem, which was the problem. People wanted a daily podcast and there wasn't one. That was the solution.
And I think that's the thing as well. It's like when you were just saying about when people, the things people think about themselves and so many people struggle with imposter syndrome, and like they just don't trust themselves and trust their own ideas and that they could really be something. And like when you were interviewing all those people, like how often did really it come up that they just really had to get out of their own way? Because I've found throughout my own experience and interviewing other people that like mindset and can like just really figuring out how to get out of your own way is so important as you kind of follow your ideas and your dreams and you try and pursue them, because you've got the imposter syndrome and all like the self-doubt and the fears and all that stuff that pops up. And I just find it so often is like one of the biggest things that holds people back. Have you found the same thing?
Absolutely. I mean, one thing I want to share right now with your listeners and your viewers of this is one just very direct sentence. You are a human being. And I know that like that may sound like kind of a strange phrase right now, but listen, you're a human being. Of course, you're going to feel fear and doubt and stress and anxiety. That's part of what being a human being is. Every human being that's ever walked this planet has had those emotions and always will forevermore. That's part of our DNA. It's part of the innate human existence that we are. So just now get over yourself and realize, okay, I'm a human. Of course, I'm experiencing these things. And now how do I rise above? And that's what people like Carrie, myself, and the other 3,000 plus successful entrepreneurs that I've done, we've all had those exact same emotions that you're having right now, all of them. And we still do to this day. I mean, we're still human beings, hello. But we've just found ways to rise above. And one of those ways, by the way, this is skipping ahead a few steps, is step 6, chapter 6. And this is such a critical step. It's creating or joining a mastermind. That has to be part of your roadmap, because your mastermind is going to be your support system. It's going to be the place that you're bouncing ideas off of. It's going to be people that are holding you accountable for actually setting goals, but then accomplishing those goals that you set. That is such a critical part to every successful entrepreneur's journey. You have to have this meaningful accountability group, this meaningful mastermind, this meaningful peer group that you are spending considerable time with. And I say in the book, I say it's a minimum once per week, you're meeting with these individuals and you are going through a very specific process throughout this, mastermind meeting where you are doing those things. You're supporting each other. You're guiding each other. You're saying, listen, I know you're scared right now. I am too. Like these are emotions that we have. Now, how are we going to get through this fear? How are we going to get over this doubt? How are we going to break through this imposter syndrome? And then together, you're able to support and guide each other. And again, make very meaningful goals on every one of these meetings, and then be held accountable to accomplishing those goals, by the next meeting. And that is a critical part of that process.
Yeah, I totally agree that like, especially meeting once a week at least, to like be held accountable, stay on track. It changes everything. And I think so often people are so afraid to invest in themselves and to invest in their businesses and invest in their dreams. But it's like the biggest thing you can do for yourself, because there's like such a reward to actually being in the right space with the right people who are going to elevate you. It makes such a big difference. I totally agree.
Yeah. Back in 2012, like the best thing I did, Carrie, is I dropped $3,500 down that I really didn't have. And I joined Cliff Ravenscraft's podcast mastermind. It was 10 people and we met every single week for a year. That is the reason why I launched Entrepreneurs on Fire on time, why I kept doing it. Because listen, I made a pledge to those people. I'm doing a daily podcast for at least a year and we'll see what happens. Do you think I would have kept doing that if I was, alone in my office by myself, like speaking to an empty room? Because I didn't have any listeners on my podcast for months when I first started. It would have been so easy to give up if I could have just slunk away off into the shadows, which so many people do. But I couldn't, because I had my accountability group who knew what I was doing, and they weren't going to let me slink away. They were going to hold me to my commitments, and they did. And then I was doing it long enough to hit that inflection point.
So I don't know whether this will be the same for you, but because you started as a podcast, did it take you a while to actually make money and like turn it into a viable business? Because for me, like when I started my first business in 2005, it was phone unlocking. It made money right away. But when I started the Female Entrepreneur Association, it took me like 2 years really to, one, it's because I had all these money blocks, but I was focused on like really building up an audience and like getting stuff out there. And I know it doesn't need to take that long, but I just wondered how long did it take you? Because I feel like this is another thing where people trip up on. Again, like, but, you know, well, my business isn't making money right now, so therefore it's going to fail. Like, it's failing. And I think people see I should be making like 30 grand in the next 6 months or 6 weeks or $1 million in my first year. And like, we hear all these numbers flying around and it kind of makes people feel like they're failing. So yeah, I just was curious to know with you, like, what did that look like?
Money blocks are huge. Like, I think that could be a whole other like conversation and podcast episode because money blocks exist in almost every single human being to a huge, huge level. So I can tell you, for me, monetization was not overnight. I actually have been publishing income reports from almost the very beginning of my business. And in the first year, so the first 12 months of my business, I made $27,000 over those 12 months. And most of that 27K, by the way, came in like months 9 through 12. So like almost no money the first 9 months, 27K like in the last few months. And then I hit my inflection point month 13. I launched my first course and I had a 6-figure month. And then since month 13 of my business, I have not had a month under $100,000 of net profit. That's 91 months in a row. And Carrie, we've published every one of those 91 monthly income reports on our website. They're super valuable. We bring in our lawyer for a legal tip. We bring in our accountant for a tax tip. And a lot of people ask me, like, why do we publish these monthly income reports? There's actually a lot of reasons, but one of them is the one that you brought up because so many people have money blocks. It's like, we've got to stop like being afraid to talk about money. Like, money makes the world go round. And that is going to be the case for the foreseeable future. It really does. It allows you to have shelter, to get access to the food you need, to support the ones that you love, to do the things that you want to do, to invest in your own business, to do advertising, to do this, to do that. It is a critical part of the business. So why do we want to like never talk about it? Like, it has to be part of the conversation. In fact, this is really skipping ahead, but chapter 17, I actually bring in Ramit Sethi to drop some of his value bombs on this topic. And it's called Keeping the Money You Make. Because this is the problem. Even once you start making money, and there's a lot of people when they get to my step 16, they will be making a lot of money. They still, at the end of the year, after they pay their staff and after they pay their infrastructure and after they pay all the expenses and taxes come out, they look at their bank account, they're like, wait a second, I've made hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in some cases, I've made millions of dollars. Where's all the money? People have such a hard time keeping the money they make. It is an epidemic out there right now, even for some of the most successful entrepreneurs that we know that have been crushing it for a long time. If you could have a flash of what their bank account looks like, you'd be like, that's interesting. And it doesn't have to be that way. And, I was pretty fortunate because I came from a corporate finance background. So like, I really had my finger on the pulse of every dollar and cent going in. And it's always been one of my strengths is the financial side of my business. And definitely a reason why, I've made over $20 million in the past 9 years. Well, like, that's a big number, but what does that really mean? Well, that's actually translated to 8 figures of net worth for me, like actual net worth. And, there's a lot of companies I see in the Inc. 5000 where there's like, oh, this company's crushing it. They just made $3.4 million last year with 120 employees. I'm like, yeah, there's no way that company's making money. Like, you can just do the math. It's like that company's losing money. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, sometimes you've got to, go through some years of investing and losing money. I mean, look at Amazon, whatever. But my point is, you've got to learn how to keep the money you make at some point.
Yeah, it's so true. I definitely struggled with that so much, especially when you get to that point in your business where, say, like your operations change and your team changes and then you have all these people. And then before you know it, you're like, oh my gosh, what just happened?
Your monthly run rate's like 40K. You're like, I've got to now make $41,000 before I've actually made a dollar.
Yeah. And it gets so, I've definitely experienced the struggle of that and then thought, oh my gosh, I have to make some really big changes and decisions to like sort this out. It's almost like the idea that like, as the revenue expands, you expand into this space where then the expenses can go up. So then you become complacent with your money because you think, well, this money's coming in. So like, yeah, anyway, it's.
And by the way, that's why, like, if you look at my last 9 years of income reports, which you can, every year we have obviously the total dollar amounts that we make. Like, my business has been plateaued financially for essentially 8 years. Like, we are between $2 and $3 million every year in revenue. But guess what? That's my choice. I didn't want to go to 10 people on my team, to 20 people on my team. I didn't want to increase my ad spend by 10x, by 100x. I didn't want to do all the things it was going to take to get to $10 million. Like, I wasn't willing to work 5 times harder to make 2 times more money. So I have a team of 3 people, 3 virtual assistants. My total expenditures for their salary every month is under $4,000. And I just run a lean, mean, profit-making machine. Like, that's what I want. If I can net profit a couple $1 million a year, which is all I've been doing now for 8 years in a row now, and that's net profit. That's after all expenses, after all taxes. Then I'm running the business that I want to run because I'm a lifestyle entrepreneur. I'm a location independent entrepreneur. I travel with Kate for 3 months a year. Like, we're off, we're gone. I work hard 5 days per month, and then 25 days per month, I'm literally in cruise control, doing other things, health, wellness, whatever else I want to be doing at that point. And like, that's the business that I wanted to build. Like, and that's what I help people get to in this book is like, I teach you how to understand what your version of uncommon success is, not what Gary Vaynerchuk's version is, which is running a 900-person company in New York City, which I love that he loves doing that. And that's awesome for him. That's his version of uncommon success. A lot of people are like, oh, you and Gary remind me so much of each other. You guys have so much energy. I'm like, I'm nothing like Gary when it comes down to what I want. Like, I want to live in a little like community in southeastern Puerto Rico. I want to wake up every day. I want to work hard, 5 or 6 days a month, which I do. And then I just want to relax, to focus on enjoying life. And again, my health and my wellness are really my biggest focuses right now. Like, I'm just kind of, really dialing that stuff in. That's my uncommon success. That is my version of financial freedom and fulfillment. And I don't and never will judge anybody for what their uncommon success looks like. But what I will challenge people on is never even sitting down and identifying it in the first place. So of course you're never going to get there because you don't even know what it looks like. You don't even know what your version of uncommon success looks like. And so often I hear from people, Carrie, I ask them, well, how much do you want to make, next year? And they say more. And more is not an answer. Like, more is that means it's never enough. And like, that's one thing that I found very early and that I'm grateful for is I found out what enough is. Like, I found my enough, and I'm not willing to grow my team, to add more stress and anxiety to my plate. I know what I love doing. I make plenty of money. I'm frugal with the money that I make. I invest it wisely. And that's what I want. And that's what I want people to have is identifying what they want.
Yeah, that is so powerful in itself. And if that was like the biggest takeaway people take from this episode, it's like asking yourself, like, what is your intention for your life? What is your intention for your business and for the amount of money that you want to make? Like, what is enough? Because I think we get so caught up with the ego of like thinking that it needs to be more and more. And we need this and we need that. And we need to keep expanding and expanding and expanding. Well, what if we don't? Like, I think you're such an amazing example of like what's possible and that it doesn't have to be this like constant chase for more and more and more to live a happy, fulfilled life. And I think it's like really amazing what you've created, working 5 days a month and, living in Puerto Rico, living in this incredible house with this amazing pool, this amazing outlook, traveling for 3 months of the year, netting, a couple of million every single year. That is phenomenal. And what I love is that every single one of us has the ability to make that happen if we want to. Like you said, what is to each of us what we want, but it's amazing because like so often people are like, yeah, that's not real, that's not true, people can't do that. And I'm like, yes, they can. And I love that you are proof of that. And it's so inspiring. And
let's be honest, a couple $1 million is a big number for a lot of people, and it always will because it is a big number. But an example I give in my book that's so true and relevant here is I have a very good friend right now who lives in Bozeman, Montana, which is like a very rural state, small town. And he makes $47,000 a year. He wakes up every morning, he goes hunting, he fishes, he comes back, He works a couple hours on crafts that he loves. That's his business. That's his big idea. And then he makes $47,000 a year. He lives well below his means. He is so financially free. He invests every single month into, very structured, conservative investments. He is very fulfilled. And this guy, I put him on the same level as me. He's financially free and fulfilled. I'm financially free and fulfilled. Does it matter that I maybe have 1 or 2 more zeros in my bank account at the end of the day? No, because he's living the exact life he wants with plenty of money, living below his means. So it's possible for anybody when you sit down and actually identify it. Like there's a great, passage in Tim Ferriss's book, 4 Hour Workweek, where, everybody's just like, oh, I'm just going to work until I'm 40 so that I can afford to go and retire on a beach in Bali. And he's like, well, how much would it cost right now to go live on a beach in Bali? And like $1,000 a month is pretty much the answer. And he's like, you can't do that right now? Like you got 50,000 in the bank. Like you can do that for the next 50 months. Like, what are you waiting for? Like, why are you waiting until you're 40 when you're going to have a family by then and mortgages and cars? Like, go do it. Like, but you've just got to take the first step, like actually sit down and identify it.
Yeah, so true. One of the things that you said was around there being this lie that like self-proclaimed experts are telling in the online world. And I just wanted to talk about this and like, what is that lie and like dissecting that a bit.
Yeah. So first off, I just want to say there are some fantastic experts out there. I mean, you're listening to one of them with Carrie. I mean, there are amazing people giving amazing value out there in this world. I've interviewed over 3,000 of them. But I've also been exposed to what I like to call the so-called experts. And to me, the big red flag there, Carrie, is they love to use like these kind of phrases like, hey, the path to success, it's secret, it's hidden, it's very difficult and complicated. But, I have the key to unlock your path to success for $1,997.97. And like that's out there in this world at a high level because, anybody can say what they want to say. And when I hear that, I'm like, listen, I need to just shout from the rooftops that, listen, I've interviewed 3,000 successful entrepreneurs. I myself have been a successful entrepreneur for over a decade now. Like I know that the path to uncommon success is not complicated. It's not hidden. It's not secret. This isn't the secret path or the hidden path or the complicated path to uncommon success. It's the common path because when you boil down what Carrie has done, what I have done, what other entrepreneurs have done, and the commonalities that we all share with each other, it's 17 core foundational principles. And every single one of you is going to look at these principles on these 17 steps and say, I understand it. It's common sense. By the way, common sense, unfortunately, is not common practice, but it is common sense. And I can go through this process step by step by step. And so I just want to stop the lies that are going around that this is a secret hidden path only for certain people and only for, obnoxious, dollar amounts. So I wanted to write, in my opinion, the definitive book that just bursts all of those bubbles and just says, hey, for the price of an admission, $25. I mean, you're getting the common path to uncommon success. You're getting a 17-step revolutionary roadmap to your financial freedom and fulfillment in one book. Yeah.
And thanks for saying that, because I think sometimes people are so freaked out by other people potentially, saying that it's like making it complicated, because it doesn't need to be complicated. It can be so simple. So going to your 17 steps then, which is your favorite step? Do you have a favorite step? Maybe you don't.
Just to your point though, real quick about complicated, every time in the past decade, I've tried to do something that's complicated, and I've tried, by the way, I've tried many times. It's always failed. I'm like, what am I even doing? Every time I've just done the simple, obvious step, it's worked. Like, and basically, by the way, that simple, obvious step is asking my audience, Fire Nation, what is your biggest struggle? Them telling me what their biggest struggle was, and then me creating the solution to that struggle. It's not complicated. It's really that simple if you just put in the work. So my favorite step by far, so this book is 71,000 words total. Average chapters, 3,500 words. Step 7, chapter 7, took me 2 weeks to write, every day for 2 weeks. It's 13,500 words, just this one chapter. It is creating a content production plan. Carrie, I stepped back after writing this chapter and I said, this is the reason why, with a team of 3 people, I've been able to produce over 3,000 episodes, create 3 journals, create Podcasters Paradise, the biggest podcast community in the world, other courses, other products, other services, travel the world, speaking, doing all these things, all the while producing 3,000 podcast episodes, because I have a fantastic content production plan. And by the way, my content production plan used to be terrible when I started. Everybody's was. You didn't know, nobody knows what they're doing when they start. But over a decade, I've just turned this into a beast of a content production plan. And I'm going to be honest, almost every single person hearing my voice right now and seeing my face, your content production plan is terrible. Like, I'm just being honest with you. Like, don't be offended, because I'm trying my best to help you here, because mine was terrible, and it was terrible for too long. I wish somebody had told me how terrible it was so I could have done something about it. And even better yet, given me a 13,500 word step-by-step process to make it better. And that's exactly what this step is. It is fantastic. I bring Kate Erickson into this chapter as well to contribute her genius to this process, because she is the systems and processes like brain behind Entrepreneurs on Fire. That's why we can run such a lean, mean, profit-making machine so well. And this chapter will change your life.
And yeah, especially nowadays when creating content is just so important for every single entrepreneur out there. Yeah. And it doesn't need to be complicated, and it doesn't need to be like stressful. Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. Well, thank you so much for coming and chatting. I'm so excited for you and this book being out in the world. And I think it's just going to be helpful and so impactful for so many people. And we're going to do a giveaway and give away 10 copies of your book. So for everyone listening, to be in with a chance of winning, you need to just take a screenshot of listening to this episode, share it with us over on stories, tag us at Female Entrepreneur Association, and maybe you can tag you too. What
at John Lee Dumas.
So yes, tag John Lee Dumas, and that is all you need to do to be in with a chance of winning, and we will be announcing the winner over on our Instagram account. But I just want as many people to read this as possible, because books changed my life as well, and my dad always says to me, even if you just get one idea from something, it's worth it. And I think so often, like from the books I've read, sometimes it's just that one idea that just stands out. In fact, I was just reading the first chapter of your book, and you had said this one, I don't know whether it was a book you were reading or something, and it was this Albert Einstein quote that you said jumped, was it audio or something that just jumped out at you, and you were like, it changed everything. Well, share the quote.
Try not to become a person of success, but rather a person of value. And the reason why it smacked me in the face, Carrie, was because in 2012, I looked in the mirror and I said, I have not been doing anything of value. I haven't been a person of value at all. I've been chasing success. And I committed in that moment to become, for the first time in my life, a person of value. And that led me to launch a daily podcast that was free, consistent, and valuable. And, something I just kind of want to end on here, because I think it's an important message that you'll resonate with, knowing, you very well from our interviews and interactions, is I want to be honest with everybody here. Like, building this business was hard. Carrie building her business was hard. Like, it's hard work. Like, following these 17 steps, this is going to be hard. It's hard work. But you know what's also hard? Just being broke, living paycheck to paycheck, like getting up every day being miserable about what you have to do for the next 12 hours in your life. That's hard too. And I lived that life too for 6 years. So my call to action to everybody here is choose your hard. And I really appreciate, Carrie, you let me come on here. Giving away those 10 books is so generous of you. You're such a generous soul. And, we do have some amazing bonuses for people as well that do get on and pre-order this book, or even just order it in general over at uncommonsuccessbook.com.
Amazing. There's so many other things I could go on to say, but I just think that's the perfect ending. So powerful. Thank you so much. I'm so excited for you, and I'm so happy to have you on our podcast. So thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
I hope you've all loved listening to this week's episode, and I will see you next week for another episode of the She Means Business Show. I hope you loved this week's episode of the She Means Business Show. If you want more help and support to build a wildly successful business, then join hundreds of thousands of women and become an FEA insider. You'll get access to some of our amazing freebies, to our bonuses, to our giveaways, to so much good stuff. Head over to femaleentrepreneurassociation.com/insider to get all of the goodness. And I will see you next week for another episode of the She Means Business Show.